Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the free legal advice show on British Muslim TV. I'm your host, Ilyas Bulbulia, and I'll be with you for the next hour. As our regular viewers are aware, the free legal advice show provides you, our viewers, the opportunity to call in and ask us any questions that you have on any aspect of English law. On this show, I should be able to cover a vast, diverse range of matters. Matters ranging from immigration law matters, family law matters, criminal law matters. So whatever your questions are relating to English law, please feel free to ring on the number that appears at the bottom of the screen. Now, every week we get numerous calls and messages relating to immigration law matters, which is fantastic. But as I said earlier, if your query relates to other matters, could be a family law matter, criminal law matter, whatever it is, as long as it relates to English law, please feel free to ring on the number that appears at the bottom of the screen. Alternatively, you can send me a WhatsApp message on the mobile number that appears at the bottom of the screen. Now, what we do find every week that we get numerous messages on the mobile number. A lot of queries relating to legal advice, legal issues are confidential, are quite sensitive, and people don't necessarily want to come live on air and ask us questions live on air. So a fantastic, easy way to contact me live in the studio here is to simply send me a message, a WhatsApp message on that mobile number, and that message will be fed through to me here live in the studio, and I will be able to answer your question live on air. So you can give me a ring either on the mobile number if you want to speak to me directly, or on the mobile number if you want to send me a message. Now, obviously legal matters, sometimes you find when a caller calls in that the matter is quite complex. I need to take quite detailed information from the viewer who's calling in. Sometimes I find that I need to look at certain documents before I can advise properly. And in my experience, this tends to happen with immigration law queries where there might have been a refusal from the Home Office. Sometimes it's helpful for me to look at the refusal letter. So if the matter is complex, or I need to look at your documents, then I will ask you to leave your number with the control room, and I'll have that more thorough discussion with you off air, or I'll look at those documents and then come back to you after having looked at those documents. And again, as always, this is advice that we provide absolutely free of charge, whether you call in today and ask us any questions live on air, or you send in your documents later on and I'll have a more in-depth discussion with you later on. It's advice which is completely free of charge. So let's look at some of the questions which have been coming in already on WhatsApp. I've got a couple of questions relating to British passport applications, which I just want to run through first. But as always, if you want to speak to me live on air, please do feel free to ring on the landline number, which is at the bottom of the screen. So let's look at our first question. And our caller is asking about an overseas passport application. He says, first of all, the caller is asking, can you advise me where to go? I want to apply for a British passport for my child who's overseas. So it's a fairly simple question, and we've got a couple of questions on overseas British passports. So maybe that it's from the same viewer who was asking. But let's look at this first question that's come in today, which is basically, how do you apply for a passport where the child is abroad? And I think this is a question which actually relates to whoever is making the application from abroad, whether it's on behalf of a child or whether it's on behalf of an adult who's living abroad. Many people nowadays obviously work abroad. They may be in the Middle East, they may be in Australia, Canada, wherever it is. People move to these countries to work there, and obviously they're British passport holders, and it happens that the passport is coming to an end, or they've even passed their expiry date. Obviously, they're not going to come to the UK simply to renew their passport, and there are arrangements in place, facilities in place for adult passports to be renewed, or if you're a child and an application is being made by your parent, then for that, the child's application to be made abroad as well. So wherever you are in the world, Middle East, Far East, wherever it is, there are facilities and arrangements in place, obviously, for your passport to be renewed. The key point here is this, that there are two different schemes or two different procedures that the Home Office uses in order to process a passport application. And that depends on which country you're in. So if I give you an example, if you're in the Indian subcontinent, whether it's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, then the procedure is slightly more complex. There is a paper-based application that needs to be made, and physical documents, significant number of physical documents need to be sent to the passport office here in the UK. Now, contrast that with somebody who is maybe in Australia, Canada, or in the Middle East, Dubai, for example. Their application process is different. It's an online application which is made very similar to how you would make an online application if you were applying to renew your passport here, or if you were applying for your first passport here. So one is a paper-based application which applies to certain countries, and the other is an online application which applies to other countries. Now, in my experience, my view is this: the different procedures that we have, whether it's a paper-based application or an online application like you and I would do in the UK, I think what determines which procedure is used is really based on certain risk analysis that the Home Office has done. If the Home Office feels that it may be possible that certain documents may not be that reliable from certain countries, then in my experience, those countries have been nominated for or designated for paper-based applications where a significant number of supporting documents have to be submitted. Now, contrast that with other countries where the Home Office is of the view that there's less risk of fraudulent documents being submitted, or it's more easy for them to verify documents. For those countries, you have the online process where the number of documents that you submit are significantly less. So the first point to make as far as overseas passport applications are concerned is that they can be made abroad, as you would expect. The procedure is going to differ depending on the country from which you are making that application, whether it's an adult application, whether it's a child application. Now, how do you find out what the correct process is? Well, to be quite honest, the Home Office has moved quite fast in terms of becoming quite digitalized, becoming a department which has a lot of information, up-to-date information on its website. And you simply go onto the Home Office Passport Office website, and it will ask you a series of questions about where the application is going to be made from, as in where the applicant currently resides. They'll ask you questions about whether it's a first application or a renewal application. It'll ask you about the age of the applicant to determine whether it's a child or adult application. Once you answer all of those questions and you get to the end, you will then be told what you need to do. It could be that you're told that you need to make a paper-based application, in which case you'll be able to download that overseas passport form. That overseas passport form is more or less identical to a passport form that you get from the post office if you're making a paper-based application. So they're more or less identical forms. So if it's a paper-based application, you will simply download that paper-based application, and you will then complete the form in your own handwriting. You'll get it countersigned, etc., and then you will submit that in accordance with the instructions on the website. And generally speaking, from my recollection, those overseas passport applications are submitted here in Durham. If you go on the website, you'll find out what the fee is. And there is also an extensive list of documents that you need to submit as well. So if it's a paper-based application, not only are you submitting how the person is eligible for a British passport, so it could be parent's passport, birth certificate, and the child's if they have another overseas passport, a copy of their passport. Not only will you be submitting those very basic documents, you'll be submitting a lot of other documents because the Passport Office wants to be sure this is a genuine and correct application. So it could be the parents' marriage certificate, it could be the initial hospital birth certificate, it could be immunization certificates, it could be photographs together. So there's a whole range of documents that the Home Office will ask for if it's a paper-based application. Now, if you go onto the Passport Office website and it says that you need to do the online application, you'll find that it's a much easier application. You make the application online, you make the payment online, and the type of documents that you need to submit are going to be extremely minimal. They'll tell you at the end the 2 or 3 documents that you need to submit. And again, those documents are normally submitted here in Durham. So that's the process that one needs to go through when submitting a passport application. It's done initially, you go online, you work out whether it's a paper-based application or an online application, and you follow that process through. How long does it take for this to be processed? If it's a complex matter where you're having to submit a significant number of documents, it could be anything from 5 to 6 months to 8-9 months. If it's a simple application where it's been done online because it's from a country where the documents are more reliable as far as the Home Office is concerned, it's a much quicker decision. You could get a decision in the space of 2 to 3 weeks. So you need to factor that in as well when you're looking at traveling to the United Kingdom. How long is it going to take to get this application processed? So do bear that in mind. The costs are more or less the same. I hope that answers your question in detail in relation to how you go about making the application. We're going to be taking a short break. We'll be back in the next couple of minutes. See you then. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Free Legal Advice Show on British Muslim TV. I'm your host, Ilyas Bulbulia. To speak to me live on air, you can ring on the number that appears at the bottom of the screen, 01924 231 083, and your call will be put through to me live in the studio, and I'll be able to advise you or give you some guidance in relation to any query that you have relating to the English legal system. Alternatively, if you want to send me a WhatsApp message with your query, please feel free to do so. You can do so on the mobile number that appears at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to speak to me live on air, please ring on the landline number, or by all means, you can send me a WhatsApp message on the mobile number that appears at the bottom of the screen. As always, we've got a number of WhatsApp messages coming in, which is absolutely fine, fantastic. Let's look at the next question that's come in. And that relates to a spouse application. And what our viewer is asking is that in light of the current situation with lockdown and people losing their jobs, has the Home Office made any concessions relating to the financial requirement which needs to be met when making a spouse application? Okay. So that's a question relating to a spouse application, which is normally made from abroad. And this question is relevant not only for somebody making an initial spouse application to sponsor their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom, or their fiance to come to the United Kingdom. It's also relevant when you're extending your spouse visa or you're applying for indefinite leave to remain. So in relation to all 3 stages, whether it's an entry clearance application, whether it's a further leave to remain application, or whether it's an indefinite leave to remain application, this issue about finances arises in relation to all 3 stages. Now, the question is really that in light of the current situation with COVID-19 and the sort of lockdown that we've had, people losing their jobs, people having their hours reduced, people being placed on furlough. Are there any concessions that the Home Office has made for those making spouse applications, whether an entry clearance application, further leave to remain application, or indefinite leave to remain application? Because as our viewers will be aware, certainly those who have gone through this process will be aware that one of the key problems with any family type of settlement application, when you're sponsoring your husband or wife over, is can you meet the financial requirement? And the normal financial requirement that has to be met is that the sponsor has to be earning £18,600 per annum. And obviously, if the applicant is here in the UK, you can look at the applicant's income as well, and you can have a combined income of £18,600 per annum. But what you do look at is whether this financial requirement, which generally applies to all applications, whether the £18,600 financial requirement is going to be met or not. That's what causes most of the problems in these type of applications. Now, what you experience in practice is that somebody might have been earning £20,000 a year, £25,000 a year, but because of the current situation where there may not be enough work in the sector in which they work, for example, certain retail sector jobs have been badly affected. It may be that their hours have been reduced, or it may be that they've been placed on furlough. So instead of getting their full 100% pay, they are now receiving only 80% of their pay. It could be that they've lost their job in the current climate, and they've just started a new job recently, and they've only got wage slips for 1 or 2 months. So this is a particular problem which has become worse in the current climate. It's always been difficult, in my experience, to meet the financial requirement, the 18,600 requirement. It's always been difficult to do that. But I think it's become worse in the current climate, with people not earning enough, or losing their jobs and starting new jobs and not being employed for 6 months, which is what the Home Office normally requires. Now, that's the context, that's the background in which this question is being posed, that in these difficult circumstances, has the Home Office made any concessions, or is there any flexibility when it comes to making a spouse application? Well, there is some flexibility, and it may help certain applicants, but it may not go far enough to help all applicants who are struggling to meet the financial requirement. Now, what are these concessions that the Home Office has made? Well, the first major concession that the Home Office has made is to say that if you were meeting the £18,600 requirement before the problems occurred, before your hours were reduced, etc., and your hours were reduced because of the current situation, then the Home Office is prepared to look at your income, which you were on before the reduction in your salary. So instead of relying on your latest 6 months of income, the Home Office is prepared to look at your historical 6-monthly income. So that may help you. Certainly if you were on a good wage and your income unfortunately has now dropped, and the reason for that is because of the current climate, there isn't enough work there, etc., then you may be able to rely on your historical income to meet the requirement. And certainly in practice, we've done cases where people have relied on their income from the period, the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, when they were on their full pay. And then after March 2020, when we had the first lockdown, where the majority of people, unless they were critical workers, majority of people were working from home, and they had salaries reduced, they were furloughed, etc. So for those kind of employees, it's been helpful to rely on the pre-lockdown income. So that's one concession which has been quite helpful. The second concession, as far as employment is concerned, of furloughed employees are concerned is the Home Office has said that if you're on furlough and you're receiving 80% of your pay, so you could have been normally on, say, £19,000 per annum, but because now you've been furloughed, your actually take-home pay has now reduced to about £15,000 per annum, so below the required threshold of 18,600. So if you've been furloughed and you're receiving 80% of pay, and it means that you're now below the threshold for meeting the financial requirement, the Home Office has said, look, in that situation, whatever you're getting, we will consider your 80% pay as if you were receiving 100% of your pay. So somebody previously on £19,000 per annum, that's their 100% of pay. Currently, a reduction of 80,000 means that they're on approximately 15,000. That £15,000 salary, the Home Office is prepared to count that as a full 100% salary. So similar to what they were receiving before, the £19,000 in our example that I've just given. So that's another helpful concession made by the Home Office. One is they're prepared to look at your historical pay. Secondly, they're prepared to look at your furlough pay and consider that to be 100% of your pay, as opposed to what you're actually receiving at 80%. So those two factors do actually help many employed sponsors in the UK. And as I said at the outset, it may not help everybody, but it's there. There's a lifeline there for people who have been affected by the current pandemic. So that's helpful. So certainly that's something you need to bear in mind. So if you're looking at making an application and you're thinking, you know what, I've lost my job, my income's not enough, etc., do bear in mind that there are two factors there, two matters there that the Home Office is prepared to take into account. So there is that flexibility there. Finally, on that point, I know I've looked at those who are employed and the concessions made in respect of them. There is some flexibility as far as self-employed applicants are concerned. And as far as self-employed applicants are concerned, maybe it relates to somebody who's got a shop. Classic example, barber shop. Unfortunately, they've been closed for the vast majority of the last 12 months, scheduled to open on the 12th of April. They've had a lot of loss of income. So that's just an example. It could be that somebody is a taxi driver and obviously because of restaurants being closed, schools being closed, etc., that's had a knock-on effect on their earnings as well. Now, if that's the case, the Home Office has said, although in very general terms, that if your business has been affected by COVID-19 and you've suffered a loss of income as a result, then the Home Office is prepared to accept whatever your income is. Now, the difficulty I see with this is that the Home Office guidance on this point is very vague. We don't know at this stage whether they are simply going to accept an assertion made by the sponsor saying, look, I've lost income throughout the last 12 months. Had I not lost that income, I would have, earned 18, 19, 20,000 pounds a year. Just a simple statement made by the sponsor along with the current year's income, whether that's going to be accepted or whether the Home Office is going to be stricter and they're going to analyse the bank statements to see when the income dropped, or whether they're going to ask for the previous year's income and make a comparison to see what you were earning before. And is it true that your income has only dropped because of the current pandemic? Or is it the case that you've always earned a sum which was never going to meet the financial requirement? So a lot of questions there in relation to that concession that the Home Office has made. So on the one hand, they are saying, if you've lost income, you're self-employed, we'll accept your reduced income. So that's fantastic. But a lot of questions still are left unanswered as far as this concession is concerned. So unfortunately, when clients come in and say, look, will this work? We're having to say, you're going to have to put an application in, and then you're going to have to see what the Home Office says. We're going to be taking a short break. We'll be back in the next couple of minutes, inshallah. See you then. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Free Legal Advice Show on British Muslim TV. I'm your host, Ilyas Bulbulia. If you want to speak to me live on air, you can ring on the landline number that appears at the bottom of the screen, 01924 231 083. Standard charges apply for that. Alternatively, and this is quite a popular way of getting in touch with me here live in the studio, you can send me a message on the mobile number which appears at the bottom of the screen, 07950 797 017. So you can give me a ring on the landline number and I'll be able to speak to you live on air. Alternatively, please send me a message on WhatsApp. Either method is absolutely fine, whatever you feel comfortable with. Let's look at some of the questions coming in on our WhatsApp. Now, the next question that's come in, and this is a question that even in practice we come across quite regularly, and our viewer is asking, it's a short question, can I apply to the Home Office for a spouse visa without going to a solicitor? So can I apply to the Home Office for a spouse visa without going to a solicitor? Now, to be quite honest, it's quite common for us to be asked that question. And indeed, in my experience, that there are some people who do make immigration applications themselves. Now, it could be an initial application to sponsor their partner to come to the UK. It could be an extension application, indefinite application. So some people do make these applications themselves. Now, I have to say, it's becoming easier to make applications yourself. Online application forms, as long as you get to the right form, and you need to make sure you do get to the right form, it's normally quite easy to complete. So the actual online application is quite easy to do. I think the tricky part is sometimes not understanding the complexities which may arise as far as how the rules are met. So let me give you an example. For example, somebody might be employed by an organization where they've worked for 4 months. And prior to 4 months, they were working for another employer, continuously for the last couple of years. So good, solid employment history there. Now, problem is there are quite complex rules which apply because the person hasn't worked for the current employer for more than 6 months. So there are complex rules relating to the documents that need to be submitted. Is it just for that employment? Is it for the previous employment? How do you assess income? Is it assessed over 12 months? Do you look at your current income as well? So there's quite complex rules surrounding that particular aspect. Now, that's just an example. So the point I'm making is, as an applicant or a sponsor who's supporting the applicant, it is quite easy to do the online form. I think the difficulty is sometimes applicants don't appreciate how complex the rules are which surround that online application. So it might be quite easy to make a mistake because you simply haven't understood what the rules actually requires. Because although there is Home Office guidance which explains the rules, it's quite difficult to follow. And if your application is not a standard application, so if there's something unusual about it, if it's complicated, then the problem is you as an individual who maybe hasn't done this before, you may not be able to appreciate the complexities involved with your application, and thereby there is then a risk that you could make a mistake which could be fatal to your application. Now, you need to bear in mind, if you do make a mistake, the Home Office doesn't always come back to you and say, look, you know what, this looks incorrect. Can you provide us with alternative evidence, or we think you've missed this out? Can you provide us with the missing information? The Home Office may not do that. I mean, sometimes in 10-20% of cases, yes, they do come back and ask for clarification or ask for additional documents. But in the vast majority of cases, they simply make a decision on the information that you've provided. So the point I'm making here is, look, the online application process is fairly straightforward. However, there are rules, immigration rules, which are quite complex, which if your case is anything but straightforward, you may not appreciate that there are sort of certain requirements which need to be fulfilled. So there's always a danger that something might be missed. So what I would advise is that if your matter is extremely straightforward, then by all means take initial advice from a solicitor and then submit your application yourself if you want. However, if your matter is complex, or once you've taken advice, it becomes apparent that this is not going to be an easy application to do, and there's some difficulties here, some risks here, then I would certainly advise you to consult an immigration advisor who's accredited and experienced in these matters. Because what you don't want to do is make the application, spend a significant amount of money and for that to go wrong. Worst case scenario, the application is refused, you're not then able to put it right, and it results in your immigration history having a black mark, that you're an overstayer, you've got a refusal, and absolute worst case scenario, you having to go back to your home country and make an application from abroad. And you can imagine the kind of problems that you experience with that, the upheaval, etc. So unless your matter is straightforward, I certainly would advise you to seek advice, certainly seek initial advice and get a view on your application before you proceed with making an application yourself. Hope that answers that question. Let's look at the next question that's come in. Next question is, Salams, my question is that I have a case management hearing and I am representing my fiance. So it follows on quite nicely from the previous question where, the applicant, or here the sponsor, is actually doing the legwork or doing the hearing himself or herself. So question is, I have a case management hearing coming up. I am representing my fiance. Is this hearing the final hearing? If not, then what happens at this case management hearing? By the way, the Home Office has not engaged with the court or me and have not provided us with a bundle. So the question we're being asked here relates obviously to an appeal which is being processed through the Immigration Tribunal. And as is common, the matter has been listed for a case management hearing. So in answer to your first question, is this a case management hearing? Is this the final hearing? Well, if the tribunal has written to you and in the notice of hearing, it clearly says that this is a case management hearing, then it will simply be a case management hearing. It will not be a final hearing. Because if it's a final hearing, the notice of hearing will say that it's a final hearing. Now here, based on what you've said, it's clearly a case management hearing. So it's an initial hearing before you get to the final hearing. And what's the purpose of this case management hearing? Well, the purpose is simply this. The court, the tribunal, wants to look at what's happened on this case. The tribunal then wants to look at what kind of orders it needs to make in order to ensure that this case proceeds smoothly to the final hearing. Now here, the viewer is saying that the Home Office has not engaged with the tribunal process. So I'm assuming the Home Office hasn't supplied a bundle like it's meant to supply. Now, if that's the case, then what the Home Office will have to do is explain to the tribunal why it hasn't been able to comply with the order. And the Home Office, obviously, in my experience, what they tend to do is when they get this kind of notice is to get the bundle together and supply it to you, the appellant, supply it to the Home Office as well. So they do normally get their act together at this stage. So what will happen at the case management hearing is the Home Office will do all this, and the tribunal will see that, look, there was a delay, but as far as the documents are concerned, they have now been supplied by the Home Office. So what the tribunal will now do is say to the appellant, or you, in this case, you're representing the fiancé, will say, look, the next step is that you need to do your part, which is, you need to do your bundle, you need to do your statements, etc., and supply that to the Home Office. You'll be given a deadline to do that. So you've got the Home Office having done their part, hopefully, and it'll be you having to do yours, which is to, provide statements and documentary evidence on your behalf in support of your fiancé's case. So you'll be ordered to do that, and ultimately this matter will be listed for a final hearing. So when you were asking, is this case management hearing, is it a final hearing? No, the case management hearing is simply an initial hearing, and it will then ultimately be listed for a final hearing in due course. Now that may be a month down the line, it may be 2 months down the line, it just depends. But there will come a time when the matter will be listed and dealt with as a final hearing. So the case management hearing is simply there to ensure that the case is ready, the appeal is ready for a final hearing. So it's giving both parties the opportunity to get things ready. So, at this stage, absolutely nothing to worry about at all. You've done nothing wrong. The tribunal will do their part, and you're going to be given the opportunity to do yours, which is to file your statement, to file your documentary evidence and get things ready. And as always, if once you've looked at everything, if it's straightforward, by all means, do carry on with the hearing. If it's complex, do get legal advice. We're going to be taking a short break. Inshallah, we'll be back in the next couple of minutes. See you then. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the free legal advice show on British Muslim TV. I'm your host, Ilyas Bulbulia. If you want to speak to me live on air, you can ring on the landline number that appears at the bottom of the screen, 01924 231 083. Alternatively, as many viewers do, you can send me a message on WhatsApp, and the mobile number that you can do that on also appears at the bottom of the screen, 07950 797 017. So you can give me a ring on the landline number. I can speak to you live on air, or you can send me a message on WhatsApp on that mobile number. And we get many questions on the mobile number, which is fantastic. More than happy to answer your questions live on air. And if it transpires after I've given the answer that you need more detailed information, by all means, send me a follow-up question, or please do pick up the phone and give me a ring, and we can have a thorough discussion live on air. So let's look at the next question that's coming, and that relates to a spouse application. Quite a complex matter in terms of a lot of things that we need to cover with this question. And what our viewer is asking is, Can you please advise on what documents I need to submit in order to sponsor my wife to the United Kingdom as my spouse? So it's quite a, although the question is short, I mean, what documents do we need to make a spouse application? How can this viewer sponsor his wife to the United Kingdom under the spouse category, under the partner category? You know, what documents do we need to submit? It's quite an involved question, because a lot of documents do need to be submitted for a spouse application of this sort. And my advice always is that, you know, first of all, practically, what you should do is either work this out yourself or speak to an immigration lawyer and get a list, a definitive list of documents which applies in your case. Every situation is different, and there are different documents which need to be submitted depending on your individual circumstances. So there's no one size fits all, there's no one list which is applicable to all applications when you're sponsoring a spouse to come to the United Kingdom. The list depends on your individual circumstances. So either research the matter and get your documents, get your list of documents together yourself, or what I would advise you to do is speak to an immigration lawyer and ask for guidance in terms of what the relevant documents are. Now, in answer to your question, because we don't have very detailed information, all I can really do is provide you with an overview of the kind of documents that need to be submitted in a typical case. And what I tend to do with clients is to say that, look, think of it this way, that there are 4 different types of documents that you normally submit. So the sponsor is normally here in the UK. So the husband is here in the UK. So what I say to the sponsor in the UK, think of it as if there are 4 different categories, and, you know, get documents together based on that, on those categories. So what are these categories? Well, you can look at what documents you need from abroad, what documents you need in terms of your income, what documents you need in terms of your accommodation, and what message do you need in terms of relationship. So that's the 4 broad categories you need to look at. Now, I'll look at this in greater detail after we've dealt with our next question that's come in. And I'll come back to this in a few minutes. Got another urgent question that's come in. And our question is, someone criminally damaged one of my assets. And we don't know what the asset is. The question is, someone criminally damaged one of my assets. The police can't take it forward as they can't prove that a criminal offence has been committed. I don't have their name, but do know their address. Can I pursue them through a civil court to recover compensation and the cost of repairs? The cost of repairs are less than £1,000. So here, what we're being told is that an asset, we don't know what the asset is, could be a car, could be property, could be offence, it could be anything. So what our viewer is asking is where an asset has been damaged and the police are unwilling to take it forward because they don't think it's criminal. Can this matter be pursued? Now, the particular problem here is this. Now, if the police aren't prepared to pursue it, it looks like that the damage might have occurred accidentally. So, for example, it could be that there isn't enough for the police to prove that there's criminality here. Or it could be that the police's view is that we can't prove anything. We haven't got CCTV evidence here, so we can't prove exactly what's happened. There's damage, but we don't know how it's been caused. Is it accidental? Is it criminal? So it could be that if the culprit or if the person who's alleged to have done this is interviewed and they simply say, look, it was accidental, there's no other evidence which points to, no witness evidence, no CCTV evidence which points to it being anything other than that, then there may be difficulty. Or there may be witness evidence, but the police take the view that, you know, the witness evidence is not reliable or there's issues. But whatever the reason is, the police here aren't willing to take it further. Well, the point is, you can pursue it through the civil courts. And in civil courts, you don't have to prove criminality. You have to prove that the person acted without reasonable care. Every person owes potentially a duty of care to others, duty of care to them. It could be a duty to look to ensure that somebody else's assets aren't damaged. So even if it's accidental damage, you can pursue a civil action. It doesn't have to be criminality involved. So it could be accidental damage. For example, may not be relevant here. You're driving along, you have an accident. The police say, you know what, we're not going to pursue a criminal action here. Accidental damage, but you can pursue the matter. Here, the particular difficulty is that you have to identify the person who's committed or who's done the damage. That's where the difficulty is. So if you know where the person lives, that in itself isn't enough. So how do you work out who's committed damage? You might want to go on to the public register that the local authority holds with a list of people who lives at a particular address. You might have to simply go to that address and, you know, try and speak to who's there. But you do need to identify who this individual is. If the police aren't prepared to assist, then you're going to have to look at alternative means of identifying, because you can't simply serve court documents, the court summons on an address. You have to identify who at that address it is that you're pursuing. So that's the starting. Here the issue isn't whether the damage is criminal or not. Here the issue is you have to identify who the party is. If the police aren't prepared to give you that information, you're going to have to dig around and find out who this person actually is. Now, once you've identified who the person is, you can then issue proceedings in the county court. Now, normally what would happen is that you would pursue the matter using the online system that the court has for pursuing small claims. So you identify who it is, you pursue an online claim through the county courts. Now, if your damage is worth less than £1,000 or around £1,000, you're not going to recover your costs, your legal costs. You'll recover the court fee if you're successful. You'll recover the compensation that you're after. And the compensation is the cost of putting the damage right, or if it's something that can't be put right, the cost of replacement. So you'll get your court fee back and you'll get your compensation back. But the compensation is simply the cost of putting something right or the cost of replacement. You won't necessarily get anything beyond that. You might get a small amount of interest, but on £1,000 claim, any interest which is payable is going to be negligible. So identify who this person is, make your claim through the online county court system that we have for pursuing these claims. And do bear in mind that you will simply be able to recover your court fees and the cost of putting this right or the cost of replacement. But my view always is this: if you're in the right, then even if the police aren't pursuing it, if you identify the right person, you should look at pursuing this matter further. There is an issue about whether this person that you're going to pursue has any money or not, but that's another issue in itself. That brings us, unfortunately, to the end of the show. Inshallah, we'll be back next week on Tuesday at 4 o'clock.